BIBLEin365, brothers and sisters, we have arrived at First Chronicles. And folks, the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah are unbelievable. I'm going to tell you this right now. You will hear this a lot. The Chronicles of the Kings of Judah versus the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. And we do not have the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. That would be the Northern Kingdom. We only have the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. That would be 1st and 2nd Chronicles. But one of the things that we should know is that we do see lots of references made to kings of the Northern Kingdom in the book of Chronicles. We'll talk about that in just a second because it's really, really important. Now, when I talk about the Northern Kingdom versus the Southern Kingdom, if you'll remember just a very quick history, you understand the fact that Rehoboam would have been the very last king to rule the nation of Israel as a unified nation. Remember, it was the Lord who was the first king of Israel. Then Saul was the first human king. And then, of course, it was David after Saul. And then after David, it would have been Solomon, his son. And then after Solomon, it would have been Rehoboam, his son. And under Rehoboam's rule, there was a terrible, terrible split and a massive civil war that ensued between the 10 tribes to the north in the future, and always from that point referred to as the Northern Kingdom of Israel, and the 2 tribes to the south, which in the future and for a long time referred to as the Southern Kingdom of Judah. Now, this is really important because when we get into First Chronicles will give us some really important stuff. Perhaps one of the most significant variables that exist within the book of First Chronicles are the first 9 chapters. And although that may seem to be a boring pursuit for most people that look at it, it may be one of the most significant sections in the Bible because it gives us a genealogy that starts from the time of Adam and takes us through David and establishes for us, in essence, a type of resetting to establish the nation and to bring course to the idea and understanding and truth that Jesus Christ will be the one who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who will rule in perpetuity. And it's interesting because Christ, of course, comes from the line of David per a promise that was made by Nathan the prophet on behalf of the Lord to King David, letting him know that there will be somebody who will rule in perpetuity from his bloodline, of course, referring to Jesus Christ, and that would, in essence, be the house that the Lord was going to build for David. So it's really, really, really important. Now, one thing that we should note here is that when we get into the entire history of the kingdom of Israel, it's actually told in 2 books, okay? So it's like really important to understand this, all right? It would be 2 books of Samuel, so 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then 1st and 2nd Kings is where the story of the Northern Kingdom of Israel is actually told. Now, one thing that I should note, and it is very, very important, is that the Chronicles overlap much of this, okay? So let me just say this in a very broad outline. 1st and 2nd Samuel would, of course, equal 1st Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Kings would equal 2nd Chronicles, okay? One thing we should note is both 1st Kings and 2nd Chronicles begin with Solomon. And that's an important distinction to be able to understand and make when you start understanding the differences between 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, the main differences between 1st and 2nd Chronicles center around the genealogy that you see in 1st Chronicles, right? And it also speaks of the doesn't speak of the story of Samuel and Saul, except for Saul's suicide. That does talk about that. But then 2nd Chronicles omits the entire history of the Northern Kingdom. Now, although 2nd Chronicles overlaps 1st and 2nd Kings, we do know that 1st and 2nd Kings still give us some information about the Northern Kingdom of Israel on somewhat of a better basis than where we see it anywhere else, but that's where they differ, and that's kind of where they have some similarities. Now, this is really important because the thing that I would encourage you to do when you get through the book of 1st Chronicles is to understand the overall outline and how it works. As I said before, I would beg you to spend a lot of time studying First Chronicles 1 through 9. I think it's really important, especially if you are interested in the genealogy of the priesthood, especially if you are interested in understanding and establishing the genealogy of Christ and where it picks off in Matthew and where it picks off in Luke. Did I say picks off? Picks up in Luke. And it's very, very good for that. And I really need you to spend some time understanding it, okay? Now, when you get into chapters 10, 11, and 12, it deals with David becoming king. Now, you might say 3 chapters to David becoming king. What does that mean? Like, is it, talking about his whole coronation? No, it speaks of how hard of the journey it was for King David to get there. And I will tell you that when you get into this, and you should really spend some time talking about this and studying it, it gives you some nuances concerning the rule of King David and how he got there that are very useful, especially for understanding our modern day politics and understanding the history of the nation of Israel. By the way, it is very, very important that from this section of First Chronicles, we have some remarkable archaeological breakthroughs, especially, or discoveries, I think is a better term to use, especially as it relates to the subject of Jerusalem and some of the discoveries that we've made there, and of course, other areas that surround Jerusalem, which is really, really interesting. One very specific area is a well that relates to Job, and I said Job, but Joab, which is really interesting. That was a recent discovery. Actually, it was more discovered in the late 80s, but there have been some recent discoveries regarding the area surrounding that in the last 6 months. So it's really cool. And First Chronicles chapters 10 through 12 will help you shed some light about that. By the way, when you get into 13 through 16, this is where you learn that you don't mess with God's rules. You want God's protection, you do things God's way. And this is a very powerful set of descriptors that are being given to us with respect to how the Ark of God was brought back to Jerusalem and the failures that were associated with their attempt to bring the Ark back, doing it a completely different way. By the way, contrary to popular belief, it isn't just 2 Samuel where you see this, but it is in 1 Chronicles where you will also see David's plan to build the temple. You'll see that in 1 Chronicles chapter 17. And then, of course, when you get to 18 and 19 and 20, you start getting into a very thorough documentation of King David and the many victories that he had in battle and some of the defeats, believe it or not. Really interesting stuff that you can get there. When you get into chapter 21, this is the numbering of the people. Very important in a way, and very similar to that of the importance that I express in the first 9 chapters of First Chronicles, because it gives you a good idea of how things are laid out in Israel and who is what. And the numberings are important. And by the way, when you study the numberings here in First Chronicles, it sheds light on a very important place, and that would be 2 Samuel 24. I would encourage you to put those 2 passages together. They are very, very, very important. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but in 18, 19, and 20, the parallels there would sit under 2 Samuel chapter 8. And there's a reason why you want to tie those together, because they are very, very important. Now, when you get through the rest of the Chronicles here, there is one area that I would recommend that you stop at, and that, of course, is when it speaks of what the Levites are obligated to do. I will say this in chapter 22 of First Chronicles, it is a good place that shows what a good father will do in preparing their son to be successful in the task that they know their children are supposed to do. David knew that his son would be the one that would build the temple, but it was David that put it all together. He put the plan together, he gathered everything, and he made it very easy for Solomon. And you can learn a lot about being a good father, and of course, yes, being a good mother, looking at that, but especially you men, focus on 1 Chronicles 22. It will give you a lot of insight as into what happened there. Now, I mentioned the Levites. Of course, that would be 1 Chronicles 23, 24, and 25, how they were organized, what their jobs were, what their responsibilities were. And then for all of you military people, I'm just telling you this right now, you're going to want to spend some time looking at 1 Chronicles chapter 27, because you will learn a lot about military maneuvers by simply reading that chapter for a lot of reasons. And I will let you figure those reasons out when you go through them, but they are interesting and they deal with the family dynamic of a warrior. So you should pay attention to that. And of course, when you get to the very end, that would be the last few chapters or so. I want to say it's the end of chapter 27. Actually, I think just right at the beginning of 28 and into 29, you'll see David's final words before he goes on to be with the Lord. And there's some very heavy stuff that you will see there and some very important things to learn and some things that you might be able to better understand as into why God called him a man after his own heart. Lots of good stuff. You guys, listen to me. We are at the end of the month of July. I cannot believe we're going into August, and I'm excited because we got a Q&A coming, and I'm very proud of your determination and your ability to continue to grow in the Word of God. God bless you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. And on behalf of Charlie and Erica Kirk, I can tell you this, we are so proud of your accomplishments. God bless you.